Man, why do these kids have iPhones?
Because I bought them.
Is there a problem?
New iPhones don't just show up like that.
Where'd you really get them?
We paid for them. We're eating. What law are we breaking?
I asked a question. You refusing to cooperate?
I'm asking for the reason
You keep arguing. I can detain everyone here.
A police officer approached a black kids sitting in a McDonald's, accused them of having stolen iPhones without any report or evidence, and threatened detention when their aunt asked for a legal reason. The encounter escalated solely because of the officer's assumption that black children could not legitimately own expensive devices. That decision, captured on bodycam, would later expose misconduct, trigger a lawsuit, and force real consequences for the officer and the department. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. The woman confronting the officer is Angela Morris, 31 years old, a sitting city council member representing the city's 5th district. Before entering public office, she worked as a community advocate and policy analyst focused on housing access, youth services, and public safety reform. At the time of the incident, she was in her first term on the city council and served on both the public safety and budget committees. Despite her age, Morris had already built a solid record. She had helped draft multiple local ordinances, supported funding increases for youth programs and neighborhood safety initiatives, and was known for her ability to navigate policy using data rather than rhetoric. Her position required public trust and legal literacy, and that knowledge made the officer's behavior impossible to justify. The officer is Mark T. Reynolds, 38 years old, a patrol officer with the Metro Police Department assigned to the Central Precinct. At the time of the incident, Reynolds had 12 years of service, most of them spent in street patrol, with several years on a unit focused on proactive stops and high-contact policing in commercial areas. Internal records later showed a clear pattern. Reynolds had accumulated 16 civilian complaints over a 7-year period, 10 for discourteous or aggressive conduct, 7 for improper stops, and 5 involving minors. Of those complaints, 13 were classified as unsubstantiated to resulted in informal counseling, and none led to suspension or removal from patrol. Several complaints were closed without interviews of civilian witnesses, and at least 3 relied solely on the officer's written statement. Despite this history, Reynolds remained in active duty with positive performance evaluations noting his command, presence, and assertive enforcement style. The department's response followed a familiar formula. Complaints were minimized, patterns were ignored, and institutional protection ensured that repeated behavior carried no meaningful consequences. Until this stop, captured on bodycam, made that protection impossible to maintain. The encounter begins inside a McDonald's on a busy commercial strip. Near the front counter and self-order kiosks, the black kids sit at a small table close to the entrance, heads down, tapping on their iPhones while waiting for their order number to be called. Their aunt, Angela Morris, stands beside them holding a tray, facing the counter. Nothing about the scene suggests urgency or criminal activity. A uniformed patrol officer, Mark T. Reynolds, enters from the front doors. He pauses, scans the room, and fixes his attention on the kids. He adjusts his stance, then walks directly toward their table. As he approaches, his shoulders square and his pace quickens. He stops close enough that the kids have to look up at him. "Whose phones are those?" he asks, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Angela turns slightly toward him. "They're theirs. I bought them," she says, keeping her voice level. Reynolds does not acknowledge the answer. He steps closer, narrowing the space between them. The kids stop moving their hands. One lowers his phone onto the table. The other freezes, eyes fixed on the officer. This is the first visible shift, children becoming still because a uniformed adult has decided they are suspects. "New iPhones don't just show up like that," Reynolds says. "Where'd you really get them?" Angela turns fully toward him. "We're waiting for food." "What's the issue?" Reynolds tilts his head, looks past her at the kids, then back at her. His hand rises briefly toward his radio before dropping again. "I'm talking to them," he says. "You interfering?" The kids remain silent. Their shoulders are tense. One pulls his hand slightly off the table, palms half raised. They are being treated as if silence is safer than speaking. This is how power works in moments like this. Angela takes a small step forward, placing herself between the officer and the table. "I'm their guardian. You haven't told us what law you think was broken." Reynolds shifts his weight and steps forward as well. The distance closes again. "You refusing to cooperate?" he asks. Nearby, a customer glances over and then looks away. An employee pauses near the counter, watching. No one intervenes. The officer's voice grows sharper. Kids like this don't usually have brand new phones. That sentence changes the atmosphere. The accusation is no longer implied. It is stated plainly. The only basis offered is who the kids are. Angela responds immediately. That's not a reason to stop us. There's no theft report. Reynolds looks down at the kids again. Put the phones down, he orders. One kid obeys immediately. The other hesitates, then sets his phone face down. Their compliance is total. It changes nothing. If you keep arguing, Reynolds says, his hand again near his belt, I can detain everyone here. There is no mention of a specific crime, no request for identification tied to a report, no explanation beyond suspicion. The threat is procedural and vague, delivered with confidence. This is what it looks like when authority relies on assumption. Angela does not raise her voice. You're threatening detention without cause, she says. I want a supervisor. Reynolds exhales loudly and looks around the restaurant, as if assessing how public this has become. He steps half a pace back, then forward again. Stand back, he says. I'll decide what happens next. The kids do not move. Their eyes stay down. They are being disciplined for existing in public with something the officer believes they should not have. The racism is not hidden. It is operational. Reynolds turns his shoulders slightly, speaking into his radio. The request is short. While he waits, he continues to stand over the table, blocking the kid's view of the exit. Angela remains upright, hands visible, maintaining her position. When a supervisor eventually arrives, the tone softens, but the posture remains defensive. Reynolds offers a vague explanation about verifying property. No apology is given. The kids are told they are free to go, as if freedom had ever legally been removed. The encounter ends without charges, citations, or documentation provided to the family. The entire sequence unfolds because black children were presumed suspicious for owning expensive devices. Every movement, the approach, the questioning, the threats, flows from that assumption. Nothing illegal occurred. The only constant from start to finish is how quickly innocence was dismissed and how forcefully authority was applied because of race. The situation crosses a line when the supervisor arrives and immediately positions himself beside Marty. Reynolds, not between the officer and the family. He listens briefly, nods, and does not ask the kids a single question. The first visible decision is alignment. Reynolds speaks first. They're being uncooperative. Possible stolen property. The supervisor responds, without verification, all right, let's keep control here. That is the moment the injustice becomes undeniable. The accusation is repeated out loud, in public, as fact, without evidence, without a report, without even a claim from the store. Authority is now backing assumption. An employee steps away from the counter. They've been sitting here the whole time. Nothing happened. The supervisor does not turn toward them. He does not ask for receipts. He does not acknowledge the witnesses. Their testimony is treated as background noise. Reynolds gestures toward the kids. This isn't the first time, he says. We get complaints about kids like this stealing phones all the time. That sentence lands hard. It is not about these children anymore. It is a generalization, spoken casually, that frames black kids as a category of suspicion. It also echoes what internal records later confirm, a repeated habit of treating black people as pre-criminals and searching for offenses that do not exist. Angela steps forward. You're profiling them, she says clearly. You have no theft report. Your own witnesses are telling you nothing happened. The supervisor finally looks at her. Ma'am, lower your voice, he says. You're escalating. She realizes it in that moment, not as theory, but as experience. This is not about cooperation. It is not about clarification. It is about power closing ranks. The system is not malfunctioning. It is functioning exactly as designed. Reynolds shifts his stance, closer again. If you keep challenging us, he says, you're going to be detained. A customer near the door speaks up. This is wrong, he says. They're kids. Another voice follows. You can't just accuse people like that. The restaurant grows loud. Employees stop working. Orders pile up. A small crowd forms, drawn by raised voices and the sight of uniformed officers surrounding a family. The truth has been spoken plainly by multiple witnesses. There was no crime. It is ignored. The supervisor raises his hand slightly, signaling Reynolds. Detain her, he says, nodding toward Angela. She's interfering. Angela does not resist. She does not shout. Her hands remain visible as Reynolds reaches for her arm. The kids stand up instinctively, fear breaking through their stillness. Don't touch her, one employee says. She didn't do anything, another adds. Reynolds tightens his grip just enough to assert control. Ma'am, you're being detained, he says. Turn around. This is the humiliation point. The adult who questioned the officer's authority is punished. The children who were accused watch their protector restrained. The message is unmistakable. Questioning bias is treated as disorder. This moment confirms what the earlier actions suggested. The suspicion was racial, the escalation was intentional, and the institutional response was to defend the officer. With a documented history of mistreating black civilians, a history of complaints dismissed, warnings ignored, and behavior normalized as proactive policing, the employees continue to protest as Angela is held in place. The kids stand frozen, watching authority override truth in real time. What began as an unjust question becomes an open demonstration of racial profiling, backed by supervision, enforced through threat, and carried out in public without shame. Nothing about this moment is ambiguous. Witnesses spoke, facts were available. The choice to ignore them was deliberate. The situation shifts when the noise inside the restaurant draws more attention than the officers expected. Employees refuse to return to the counter. Orders stop moving. A manager steps forward and tells Reynolds and the supervisor that customers are filming and that corporate will be notified. The officers respond by calling for backup. Send another unit. Reynolds says into his radio, crowd getting hostile. What he means by hostile is disagreement. No one is threatening the officers. No one is touching them. People are objecting to the sight of a black woman being restrained, while the black kids stand frozen beside a table with phones they legally own. The response is escalation. Backup arrives within minutes. This time, it is not another patrol officer. It is a black deputy chief from the department's operations division, responding after multiple calls flagged the incident as a potential liability issue. He enters, takes in the scene in seconds, and does not speak immediately. Angela is still being held. The kids are still boxed in by uniforms. Employees are still protesting. That's enough, the deputy chief says finally. What's the basis for detention? Reynolds starts explaining. Possible stolen property, interference. The deputy chief cuts him off. From where? Reynolds hesitates. The phones. Reported stolen? No. Store complaint? No. Witness statement saying theft occurred? No. The answers stack quickly, and each one strips away justification. The deputy chief turns to the supervisor. Why was she detained? The supervisor offers a procedural defense. She was escalating the situation. The deputy chief looks at Angela's hands, still visible, still calm. He looks at the kids, then at the employees who are openly telling him nothing was stolen. He understands immediately what has happened and why. This stop has no legal foundation, he says. Release her. Now, Reynolds loosens his grip. Angela steps back without a word. The kids move toward her. The physical pressure ends, but the damage is already done. The deputy chief turns to the employees. You can return to work, he says. Thank you for speaking up. He then addresses Reynolds and the supervisor directly, quietly, but firmly. This never should have gone this far. You're done here. The deputy chief asks for badge numbers. He asks for incident logs. He asks whether body cams are active. Each question signals the same thing. This is no longer being handled internally as routine. To Angela, he says, you're free to go. All of you. The kids leave first. Angela follows. No apology is offered by Reynolds or the supervisor. They stand silent as the family walks out, watched by customers and staff who now understand exactly what they witnessed. As the doors close behind Angela and the kids, the deputy chief turns back to the officers. This is going upstairs, he says. Immediately, the meaning is clear. The department cannot defend this. There was no crime, no report, no cause, only an assumption applied to black children and enforced through threat. What began as racial profiling has become a documented policy failure, unlawful detention, supervisory endorsement, and a complete breakdown of constitutional standards. The release of Angela and the kids is not mercy, it is containment. The institution recognizes, too late, that what happened inside that McDonald's is indefensible, not just morally, but legally. Within days of the incident, Angela Mars files a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city, the police department, Officer Mark T. Reynolds, and the supervising officers who endorsed the detention. The filing is precise and direct: unlawful detention, unlawful search, racial discrimination, retaliation for protected speech, and failure to supervise. The complaint makes one point clear: nothing about the encounter was accidental. As the investigation begins, bodycam footage is subpoenaed and reviewed in full. The audio captures the assumption spoken out loud, the absence of a theft report, and the threat of detention after witnesses intervened. Internal emails obtained during discovery show supervisors discussing the incident as a public optics problem before ever addressing whether constitutional violations occurred. The concern is exposure, not harm. During depositions, a pattern emerges. Reynolds is questioned about prior stops involving black minors and black families in commercial areas. How many times have you initiated stops without a report of theft? The attorney asks. I don't keep count, Reynolds answers. But you agree you've done it before. I act on suspicion. Suspicion based on what? Reynolds pauses. Experience. That experience is examined against records the department had previously sealed from public view. Over 7 years, Reynolds accumulated 16 civilian complaints, 10 alleged aggressive or disrespectful conduct, 7 involved improper stops, 5 involved minors, 13 were dismissed without disciplinary action, none resulted in suspension. Supervisors sign off repeatedly, describing his behavior as proactive and assertive. The lawsuit also exposes a broader failure. Training records show no mandatory instruction on youth interactions in public spaces. There is no written policy requiring a theft report before detaining minors for suspected stolen property. Supervisors are granted wide discretion to support officers in the field, even when no legal basis exists. In practice, racial profiling is not corrected. It is shielded. At mediation, the city initially denies wrongdoing. Their attorneys frame the encounter as a misunderstanding that escalated. Angela's response is brief. My nephews were treated like criminals for sitting with phones while black. That's not confusion. That's policy in action. Public pressure builds as the footage circulates. Community groups demand answers. Employees from the McDonald's submit sworn statements confirming no theft occurred, and that officers ignored them. The city's risk assessment changes quickly. The case settles for $3.2 million. The settlement breakdown is documented. $1.5 million is allocated for civil rights damages to Angela and the children for unlawful detention, emotional distress, and reputational harm. $620,000 covers legal fees and court costs. $480,000 is designated for punitive-related damages tied to supervisory failure. $350,000 funds a mandatory compliance and monitoring program imposed on the department. $300,000 is placed in a protected trust for the children's education and counseling. The city does not admit liability. The numbers do. Reynolds faces individual consequences for the first time in his career. He is removed from patrol, placed on administrative leave, and later resigns during an internal review. His separation agreement includes no admission of wrongdoing, but he loses eligibility for specialized units and future advancement. The supervising officer who authorized the detention is formally reprimanded and reassigned. His record now reflects a sustained finding, something that had never happened before. Institutional reforms follow under pressure. The department implements a written requirement for a documented theft report before detaining minors for suspected stolen property. Bodycam activation policies are tightened. Supervisors are required to intervene, not endorse, when civilians cite lack of legal cause. A civilian review panel gains expanded access to complaint histories, previously classified as internal. At a city council hearing, Angela speaks once. This wasn't about iPhones, she says. It was about how easily black children are treated as suspects, and how quickly the system protects itself. The lawsuit does not restore what was taken in that restaurant: the fear, the humiliation, the lesson forced on children who did nothing wrong. But it exposes a truth the department tried to ignore. Racial profiling was not a lapse in judgment. It was tolerated behavior, repeated until it was recorded clearly to deny. This story is meant to generate awareness. It proves that racial profiling does not require violence to be devastating. It only requires authority, silence, and a system willing to treat black presence as probable cause. What happened here was not an error corrected in time. It was an assumption enforced until witnesses, evidence, and liability made denial impossible. In 2025, Black Americans were nearly 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. And 77% of Black adults say they are treated less fairly by police than white people. So here is the question. How many similar encounters never reach a camera? How many families are humiliated, detained, or threatened because they don't have power, legal knowledge, or public visibility? And how often does accountability only appear when the cost of ignoring injustice becomes too high? Do you know any organizations that work to protect the rights of Black people in America, legal support groups, community safety initiatives, or civil rights coalitions? Share them in the comments. Let's support those working for justice and safety for all. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.